over the past, say, year, some of the more interesting zero-day attacks have come from. The first thing I'll quote is the SANS Institute, their most recent paper on the top cybersecurity risks, late 2009. If you go to the executive summary, it reads approximately, Priority 1, vulnerabilities in commonly used programs such as Adobe PDF Reader, QuickTime, Adobe Flash, and Microsoft Office. And the key takeaway point from that is that no browser is listed. So the focus of the attacks has moved on from the browser and is currently focused at the plugin infrastructure. And just some news articles I dug up from one of my favorite news websites. I like their sense of humor, the Register. Does anyone read the Register on a regular basis? Excellent, we share the same sense of humor perhaps. Just a list of some attacks that were significant over the past year, and as you can see, a variety of different plugins were hit in some unpleasant attacks. So just take a plugin detour. Whichever browser you happen to use, it probably has some functionality whereby you can ask it, hey, what plugins do you think are accessible to the web in my installation of the browser? In Chrome, you do in the URL bar, you type about:plugins, and this is from one of my little laptops, and it was taken just a couple of days ago, and it said 17 plugins, which seemed like a surprisingly high number to me. And I read through the list, and I don't really know what half of them even did. So as you can see, the reason that this is a little bit grey is the colour here. Maybe you can't see the details here is because they're all disabled. There's a button that says disable, and that sort of grays them out and takes them out of your attack surface for attackers to try and compromise. I'd recommend you do the same by whatever mechanism your browser provides. Just disable. If you don't recognize it, chances are you're probably not using it usefully, so disable it. And the point of this next slide is just that I press the little details button in the top right to expand some details, and even within the plugins that I recognized, in this case, the second one down is the Adobe Acrobat Reader. I sort of know what PDF is and what it does, but I noted that as well as PDF, it purports to understand 7 other file types, which I don't really know what they do or if I need them. So just to get the point across, that some of these plugins expose a very rich amount of functionality in terms of risk. Here's a random slide. As a community, I don't think we've even got to the bottom of all of the rich functionality that all of the popular plugins provide. I think we're getting a handle on browsers and the features we have in browsers, including all the latest HTML5 features and how they interact and what the security risks are. We seem to have those quite well under control, but I'm not so convinced about the plugins. I think there's room for a lot more research here. What we see in this screenshot is the latest version of Firefox. And you can construct a web page with a little bit of JavaScript in it that uses the Java plugin to basically request the installation of any old version of Java. Apparently it's well documented and supported functionality, and it just really surprised me that you can do this. I personally don't want old versions of software installed on my machine, so I disabled the Java plugin. So let's look a little bit to the future. Thought about sandboxing and how that seems to have been successful in pushing attackers to a different part of the ecosystem where there isn't sandboxing. This is to cover a couple of other browsers that were popular in the audience, it seems, in terms of what their sandboxing plans are. And some great news recently with both of these browsers. So Safari. In April 2010, Apple announced a project called WebKit 2. And that's not a rewrite of WebKit from the ground up or anything. It's actually, I'll quote, it's designed from the ground up to support a split process model. So it's like a modification of WebKit to introduce the ability to split out processes. And Apple haven't said exactly what they're going to do with this, but if you were a betting man, you would bet that this was a precursor towards getting sandboxing in the browser, combined with a new Mac OS X technology called the Seatbelt Sandbox. So that's good news. Firefox, since I wrote these slides, version 3.6.4 has been released, I think, today or yesterday. Fantastic news. And one of the key features of that is plugins now run in their own separate process, which is, for a start, it's a fantastic move for stability of the browser. And it's also, again, this whole process separation thing, it's definitely a precursor towards sandboxing. And if you trace this feature back, it's under the umbrella of a project called Electrolysis, which was announced in 2009 with security and sandboxing as a long-term goal of all this process separation. So that's great news. All of the browsers that are popular within a year or two are probably going to have sandboxing, and that is great news for us as consumers. Which brings us on to plugins. And sandboxing plugins, it's just hard. It's very browser specific as a type of there to be, and operating system specific. It takes a lot of effort to sandbox a plugin, and that's probably why we're a little behind as a community in this area. We'll look at what the various browsers are doing on this slide. What is the future for plugins? So we're definitely seeing, as the browser is getting more and more secure, less tolerance for poor plugin security, and this is cross-vendor. We haven't. I talked to people from Microsoft, from Mozilla, about how they're tackling this problem, and we're all very worried about it. So just to quote a few things that people are doing. So Internet Explorer will basically warn you if you're about to run a plugin that it's not so sure about, that runs outside of its protected mode sandbox. You actually get a little warning about that in modern versions of IE and Windows. Firefox recently was doing some fantastic work on warning you if you have an out-of-date plugin, because that probably has known security vulnerabilities in it. You'll help to get that situation fixed, which is fantastic. Chromium, we're trying a slightly different tack on the same problem. We've announced that we're bundling Adobe Flash along with Google Chrome. That's our way of keeping Flash up to date, because obviously we have the auto-update capability to make sure that our users are up to date, and that includes anything we bundle, such as Flash. And something I'm very, very excited about that we just announced a couple of days ago is we now have an integrated PDF viewer that runs inside our sandbox. There's a lot of pain centering around PDF at the moment from people I've been talking to recently, and so sandboxing of that can only be a good thing in terms of protecting machines. So with all of these good things in motion, what might the future soft spots be? This isn't to single out any particular plugin or vendor, but the Java plugin is just very powerful in what it can do. Essentially, you can run complete applications inside it within your web browser that have as much power as locally installed binaries. And that means it's really hard to sandbox. How do you restrict the permission of something that fundamentally needs all permissions? So that's producing a lot of head scratching at the moment. It also produces a very high potential for reliable exploits. The whole write once, run anywhere paradigm, unfortunately, has a parallel in security, which is sort of write once, pwn anything if you find a suitable bug in it. Just to randomly quote a couple of recent bugs that have been fixed, but were very reliable exploits, completely cross-platform. In April 2010, had a command line injection error from Ormandy, and a pair of bugs, almost a year apart, from Koivu and Tinus to do with deserialization and abusing the natural privilege that the Java plugin has, combined with a logic error. I'll cover why operating system kernels might be in the firing line on a subsequent slide. The other thing that's going to be really interesting to see where this goes from a web app security standpoint is extension systems. So it seems very much like we're moving towards a model whereby your computer sort of is the web browser. We're doing more and more inside the web browser now. As browsers get more and more powerful, there's less and less reason to leave the web browser to go about your business. So with that being the case, does the attacker really need to get arbitrary code execution on your machine to do you a lot of damage? Maybe they'll be content to just control the web browser, all the different domains and origins that exist within the web browser. And perhaps if you had an evil extension that you were able to persuade someone to install that declared that needed access to every domain, then that might be a soft spot of the future if attackers decide that that gives them enough control to steal your banking details or your credit card. I'll gloss over this one, but operating system kernels could be a potential problem because we've mentioned sandboxing a lot. Well, as a security person, the first thing you think of when someone says, "Oh, you're within a sandbox," you think, "Well, how might I go about breaking out of that sandbox?" And one of the hot areas of research at the moment is abusing bugs within operating system kernels to sort of, once you've got sandbox code execution, exploit a secondary bug to break out of that sandbox. And there definitely is a potential for more research here. Linux, for example, has about 300 interactions with the system and has seen quite a bit of research there. Windows has about 1,400. It's a more complicated operating system. It has about 1,400 system calls, perhaps less research than Linux. So perhaps there's going to be some interesting research in the future there. Just to show you that these bugs are real, they do exist, and they're very powerful. January 2010, just recently, Ormandy found a fantastic bug in a trap handler in Windows that reliably got you from a sandboxed account to full administrator or kernel access. Very powerful. Ormandy again, with his friend Tinners, also was able to break the Linux kernel to find a bug that would let you escape a sandbox on the Linux operating system. And there's a bunch of pending disclosures in this space that aren't quite yet public. What trends might we see here as we get more sandboxing? So we've definitely seen throughout this story attackers are sort of going after this thing and then going after this thing, and they're always trying to follow the easiest path. I mean, no one wants to do a lot of work to try and break into a machine. But if we make it hard to break into machines, then we're going to force them down certain paths, as we can see. So maybe we'll see some multi-bug payloads whereby bug number 1 gains code execution on your system, and then bug number 2 escapes the sandbox. And this is possible. The good news is that finding 2 bugs and pairing them up is a lot harder than finding just one. So maybe we'll inhabit a world where we see less zero-day. Definitely, if more sandboxing comes into play, we will see increasing black market value of some of these bugs for the people that are skilled enough to put them together. Maybe we'll see some more direct-to-kernel bugs. Web browsers are constantly expanding their features that they have with some very interesting and powerful things. One recent feature that's hit pretty much all the mainstream browsers now is the ability to, from a web page, specify a font file that you want the web page to be rendered with. Enables you to make very pretty web pages. The trouble is, font files are pretty complicated things in themselves, and the act of sort of loading them into your computer can be dangerous, and there have been 2 very serious bugs here that are both fixed now, whereby an evil web page could reference an evil font that sort of exploited a bug directly in your operating system kernel, and that's one bug, complete game over. Breaking into the kernel is a very highly privileged context, more so than even the administrator. So I think this is my last slide. If you're interested more in this area of kernel attacks, a couple of my colleagues did an excellent summary of some of the stuff they found in a presentation called Party at Ring Zero. They're going to redo this presentation at Blackout in Las Vegas. If any of you are fortunate enough to attend that, I'd recommend going to their talk. Here's a slide I've stolen from their presentation. Sort of left to right represents a timeline. Red bars represent bugs they found in the Linux kernel. I think all of those, at the time they released this slide, were fixed. Blue bars represent bugs they found in the Windows kernel. So there are a couple have been fixed since this slide's a little old now, but there are definitely some bugs there, just to show you that these things are real and could be used. Finally, to link this to a real-world attack, just to show that sandboxing may not be the be-all and end-all. The recent Aurora attacks that compromised allegedly various companies relied on a bug that was set at the time to only affect Internet Explorer version 6. So what this